Julian Middleton, who founded Common Purpose, was one of 20 people who founded Demos. It was a large group of people that came up with the idea of setting up a think tank. We've never had anyone...
Well, listen, here's an example. I'm attacked...
This is really important to get this straight. We've never done any joint events with Common Purpose. He said that Julian Middleton sits on our advisory board, and she does not. This is just completely inaccurate.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Do you get any government funding?
We get some government funding, yeah. And you know what? All of our accounts are publicly available. You can go in there and check them for yourself.
No, I know, but I mean, you're a group saying we should trust the government more, and you're funded by the government.
Well, a very small amount of our money comes from government, and actually, I don't think that I've said anywhere in the report we should trust the government more. I don't know where... Have you read the report? Have you read the report?
Yeah, I've scanned over it. Jamie, let me just stop you right there for just a second. Let me just bring something up. Have you seen the video clip of the head of Visor Consultancy, Peter Powers, saying, it's incredible. Why, we had the exact same trains and exact same bus being attacked at the exact same time and exact same place. It's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, all of this, that happened on 9/11. They run drills so that it confuses the rest of the government and the echelon NSA systems. We see this over and over again. We have the official story from pillar to post, completely impossible. I went over there days after it happened. I investigated it. I've witnessed it for myself. I've interviewed the police officers I've interviewed the people that witnessed the government planting the bombs at Oklahoma City. I mean, I'm aware of this. I'm aware of Operation Gladio. I've interviewed, but I've also had family who was in the CIA, okay, who would not deal drugs for the U.S. government and murder people. So I happen to know about this stuff, okay? I'm not naive. So I understand that it's come out in federal court that our own government ships guns into Mexico and cocaine back in to destabilize our countries. Did you know that's come out?
I've not heard that, no. But, you know, just for example, to take this this drill story from Visor Consultancy, you know as well as I do that's completely ridiculous. He's come out numerous times, which is ignored by the alternative information scene, saying this was a desk-based exercise. We ran hundreds of different models. There was 20 or so people there, all of whom were police officers. He said that it had nothing to do with what happened on 7/7, and if it did, it's a pretty rubbish way of doing it, getting 15 or 20
No, we've said it was a tabletop.
PowerPoint desktop presentation.
No, it turns out there were drills physically.
And so why is it that that story is repeated over and over, even though the man himself has come out repeatedly to say that he has been misrepresented?
No, he's come out repeatedly to try to spin it.
No. I'm afraid I don't think so. It's absolutely obvious that what happens here...
What branch of the British government funds you?
We've had nothing from intelligence agencies, if that's what you're thinking, or security agencies. Most of the money that we've ever had from the government, and I think it makes up about 5% of the money we get, maybe even less than that.
And the rest tax-free foundations? What are some of the loving foundations that fund you?
It's usually just to run events, and our events are public and they're open for anyone to come to. And you know what else? And I would like to say this. I am more than happy for Paul Joseph Watson or any of your UK listeners to come into our office and I'll give them a tour. They can follow me around for a week. They can see what I do. It's really not that sinister. Everything we do is...
Will you show them the alien spacecraft in your basement?
No, that's off limits, I'm afraid. That's only for me.
Look, you're a nice, amiable person. I don't think you individually are a bad guy. So I'm not here...
Thank you very much.
I'm not here indicting you. I mean, I hope you think I'm a friendly person.
I loved your stuff. I loved the John Ronson story with you. I actually thought it was extremely courageous what you did there, and a very, very mysterious and strange set of events it was too.
Well, I mean, it is true that mainline Christian conservatives mainly go to Bohemian Grove and have gay sex together. And I'm not bashing people for their sexual persuasions. It's the fact that things aren't what they seem a lot of times is what I've found and what I've experienced. And I wish 7/7 was an intelligence operation or a group they set up and let do this. I wish that 9/11 wasn't an inside job. But Larry Silverstein says, pull the building, gave the order, watch it come down. I don't just have...
But you also know that Larry Silverstein has said over and over again that means evucuate the building.
Yeah, it was already evacuated 5 hours before. But see, I knew where you were. Hold on. I knew you were going there.
The fire brigade. He was talking about the New York Fire Department leaving. He wasn't talking about.
But I knew you'd say that. I knew you'd say that. Let me finish. This is important. Because I've done countless reports on this. We have the police say, get back, they're going to bring down the building. I've talked to the cops and say there was a 10-second countdown. I've got the newscast where they said they were going to blow it up. I have the BBC saying it had fallen 25 minutes before it did, and I brought that up knowing you'd respond with Silverstein's cover story of what pull it meant. But I'm saying it doesn't just end there.
I know that you can fit a lot of anomalies together and find any relationship you want, just like Paul Joseph Watson's tried to do with Demos and Common Purpose. It's entirely fatuous. But answer me this, and I've always wanted to ask you this question, and it is an important one. Why do you think that the American government would have felt the need to enact a controlled demolition on the two towers to actually bring them down? Would it not have been more rational to just allow two planes to fly into the buildings? That surely is enough of a cause for war if that's what they were planning. Why multiply the chances that you're going to get caught exponentially by actually bringing them down in a controlled demolition in front of the entire world that was watching? I don't understand.
Well, let me give you the answer. Do you really want the answer? It's a complex.
I want to know what you think, yeah.
No guts, no glory. Fortune goes to the bold. Bottom line, well, let me finish. Bottom line, those buildings already had asbestos and structural problems. Psychologically, you do it on a weekday morning to control the week's news cycle coming up. You have the first plane hit to get all news cameras aiming. It's a perfect psych warfare job, and I've had top former State Department psychological warfare experts on, like Dr. Steve Pachinik and others, to say, yes, it's a perfect psyop. Then the second plane hits. Everybody now knows it's a terror attack. Then you have the controlled demolition, so the insurance money can be paid and the rest of it. Building 7 that's running the attack with the CIA, FBI, and others way down the street from it, 47 stories. It's got the explosives in it. I interviewed Peter Jennings, who said that, yeah, there were bombs going off and dead bodies. Of course, he died right after we interviewed him.
Are you suggesting that the two planes flying in on their own would not have dominated the news cycle for weeks to come?
No. People had to see that giant image, plus they had to get rid of the crime scene. Okay, let me ask you this, because there's thousands of points. Do you believe not one, but 2 magical passports went out of their coats, out of their jackets, fireballs, through the building, out of the wreckage, down to the street, 4 or 5 feet of dust, and were found by the FBI later that day? Do you believe that?
I'm really not qualified to answer questions like that. In the same way that I'm not, and you're not qualified to answer questions about structural demolition. Who is qualified are demolition experts and structural engineers, and you know what the overwhelming majority of them say.
The global warming's man-made and real?
Architects for 9/11 Truth, a rabble of a few, a handful of architects who actually don't know much about structural engineering at all.
Hold on, that's it. Hold on. Stop. Architects and engineers for 9/11. Hold on a minute.
You know it well that the
outrageous. I gotta counter that.
Full well that the overwhelming scientific consensus from both demolition experts and structural engineers is that the buildings fell pretty much as one might have expected, and there was no way to control demolition.
All right, I want to counter that.
We're not here talking about. I knew that it would turn into a discussion about 9/11.
I'm going to phase you down for a minute. Stop. I got to make a point. I'm going to give you 1 minute to make your statement, and you've already been talking for a minute, and then I'm going to get 2 minutes to counter it. But I wanted to finish the earlier point. But now you've really discredited yourself. So you've got a few people that don't really know much about structural engineering. There's 1,600 architects and engineers. Many of them now, hundreds of them, have actually been involved building giant buildings. A whole bunch of them have built 30, 40, 50-story, and they've got very famous architects and engineers coming out now. NIST has had to change their story 6 times on how Building 7 fell, and now admits free fall, and has had to make up this thermal expansion garbage. All of this is going on, and for you to say they've just got a few people in architects and engineers, who do you have? Controlled Demolition Incorporated that gets the contracts to blow up these buildings, the wreckage, Oklahoma City and 9/11? I mean, you talking about those guys? Now you've got the floor. Go ahead.
What, to respond to that or to speak generally?
No. You just said that the overwhelming, just like Al Gore kept saying, all the scientists know global warming's man-made.
When 9/11 architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth submit a well thought out, properly peer-reviewed, and not by one of the truther journals, articles about this, where they not pick holes in the official account, but actually present an alternative account that can be properly scrutinized by an anonymous peers of theirs, then I'll start listening. And when that happens, because that's how we arrive at knowledge, then I'm all open to be convinced. Because for me, this is the difference. I'm not wedded to the idea that 9/11 wasn't an inside job, because if it was, I'd really want to know. I have no vested interest in trying to cover up, if the government's murdering its own civilians. I've got no interest in covering
Do governments ever stage terror?
Historically, I think they have, yeah. I mean, the whole origin of the word terror is from the French Revolution by the French government. So, yeah, the state-led terror absolutely is possible when it happens.
Okay, then let me ask you this question. No, I want you to listen. I watched Al Gore, this big fat con artist, who's an oil company baron, involved in unbelievable corruption, giant houses everywhere, carbon footprint, the size of 50 families or whatever. You've got this guy, jet setting all over the world, invested in gore and blood carbon trading in London, all these huge Rothschild Rockefeller investments in it, carbon trading, all this money, tens of billions invested in selling this, saying ice caps are getting smaller, polar bear numbers are down, polar bears can't swim, all of this patent crap that I can disprove. I mean, the polar bear population's up 5 times what it was 60 years ago. The ice caps always shrink in the summer, expand in the winter. But he kept saying peer-reviewed, peer-reviewed, peer-reviewed. Now it's come out all these emails where they try to block peer-reviewed publications, where they had an intercoterie of government-funded scientists hiding the decline. And now the whole hoax is falling in on itself. They weren't government funded, but yeah, you're talking about the University of East Anglia.
East Anglia, that's it. They were trying to.
No, it had ICCUN funding. What are you talking about?
Wait, it wasn't the British government trying to fund them. I mean, everything ultimately, a lot of stuff ultimately comes from government funding, because a lot of taxpayer money goes into government.
They said hide the decline. It's a load of crap. How does moving your coal plants to China?
Listen, I was disgusted. I was absolutely disgusted with that. And you talk about global warming. It's another subject which I feel completely unqualified to pass judgment on. And I won't pass judgment on subjects which I feel wholly unqualified, and I haven't looked at the evidence strongly.
Well, I've looked at it deeply. Listen, I have tried to cover a military event in Brooksville, Florida, and I have a witness, Mike Hansen, and the military went all over the neighborhood, and I have video of this in my film, The Takeover, all over a town saying, like a Twilight Zone episode, don't talk to Alex Jones, he's crazy. It was a military drill to practice taking over U.S. cities. I've been to these all over the country. And then I'm standing there in the woods trying to videotape the public municipal airport where giant aircraft are landing to practice inserting troops in a U.S. city. And an undercover military guy jumps out of the bushes and starts lighting things on fire to blame me for it. I've experienced government-sponsored terrorism. And me and Mike had to physically stop the guy.
Is that government-sponsored terrorism?
Yeah, it turned out he was working with the Army. I mean, I
don't think that's government. I think you're belittling the word terrorism if you think. Well,
no, that's a provocateur action.
Pretty shoddy.
The U.S. government would do that to me for trying to just cover something?
I wouldn't want to belittle the word terrorism, because terrorism is an extremely serious offence and an act. And so
setting fires is terror.
Very badly,
arson is terror, buddy.
Terrorism.
Arson in lighting things on fire in a populated area is terrorism. Lighting things on fire in a populated area is terrorism.
Pretty low bar. Lighting things on fire in a populated area is terrorism.
Absolutely. The oldest thing in the book is to set fire to things to terrorize populations. What do you think our troops did to Indian villages? Burn them out. Look at Waco. They burned those people up. I bet you think that's a conspiracy theory.
No, I read into Waco, and I read into Timothy McVeigh, of course. But there are equally cases. I mean, take for example the Reverend Jim Jones.